Ladies and gentlemen, may I direct your attention to something quite extraordinary, quite incredible, quite unlike anything you may have experienced in your life.
All right, football fans, welcome back to the Fifth and Long podcast. Patrick DeMar, Paul Kashak, the commissioner himself, back in the building. Happy Sunday. It's a Sunday, right? It's
sure
no
is.
Football, but it's a Sunday. We're recording this on the night of July 14th. We are in the heat of the Major League Baseball season. The MLB draft is on tonight. My Red Sox took some outfielder from Texas A&M, Braden Montgomery.
Pirates butchered their pick, taking some high school shortstop who will probably never amount to anything. It's all right.
Tamar Johnson 2.0.
Tamar Johnson's actually been heating up a little bit in high A ball. Still got a long way to go, and he had a hit in the futures game the other day. So
okay,
we're optimistic. We'll see.
Okay, there you go. Ladies and gentlemen, we are just over 50 days away from the start of the NFL season. It'll be 50 come the 17th of July, so we're at 53 days right now. College Football 25 is going to be releasing tomorrow, which I am ecstatic about. It's not quite football season, but it's coming around the corner. Like, I'm dangerously close to opening up some NFL related advent calendars or something along those lines. I've got the sticky note countdown on my wall already.
Yeah, I'm excited too, dude. I am still pretty enthralled with the MLB season. I'm not gonna lie, my Pirates are playing pretty good baseball. So like it hasn't been like waiting on pins and needles for the NFL season to come around. But I would be lying to you if I said that I hadn't done some mock drafts since the last time we spoke. I've got a couple under my belt. Usually I've got like 15 to 20 mock drafts by mid-July, believe it or not, under my belt. But not this year, just 2 or 3. But getting excited, man. And I'm excited to talk some more football here with you, Patrick, even though we are in mid-July.
I haven't done a mock draft quite yet. I've done some analysis from last year, and I've been researching a lot into just what other people are saying. That's
honestly probably more valuable because the rankings still change so much, like from where guys are now and depth charts move around. So that's not what you're doing is probably better.
I don't know. I mean, there's so many random Twitter accounts you can follow now that are in the fantasy football space or other very specific fantasy, like football related sectors. Like, I don't know if you've heard of reception perception on Twitter. I
Heard
forget
of it, yeah.
I forget the name of the guy who runs it, but he does phenomenal analysis on wide receivers specifically. I saw him, he was doing something the other day where I saw him post about Brandon Ayuk, and he basically made his case for why he is an elite receiver. And you and I have had that sort of like argument before. Mm-hmm. And he laid out his stats with catches made against zone coverage and man coverage and how dominant he is in both. And it's stuff like that like you didn't have access to 4 or 5 years ago. Nobody really did. And now there's so many football nerds out there who have those advanced Sunday ticket packages that can just like watch film all day in their dark, empty apartments. That is, yes, going to be me this year.
It's not just you, dude. I have plenty of people like will go back and watch film of like all of the games for the whole slate. I'm dedicated to the fantasy football grind. I'm not that dedicated. I'm not going back to look at like a Panthers Jets game to see which receivers are actually getting open, just not getting the ball and whatnot. But I know it's become way more of a business than it was 10, 15 years ago.
I've definitely been going through my fair share of cut-ups and highlight reels. I think to this point, my favorites from last year, oh man, I mean, Kyle Hamilton defensively, his highlight reel is pretty crazy to watch. Like, you just see how many different things he can do, and I feel like the Ravens are going to use him however they want this year. On the offensive side, I've been watching Stroud highlights a ton. He's really fun. Weirdly, I've been watching not necessarily Brock Purdy, but just like a lot of Niners in general, trying to like figure them out. And oh man, there's probably a couple others, like Breece Hall is another one. Even as a Patriots fan, I can say that I've been watching some of his stuff. Maybe if the Jets take a step up this year, his stats will go up another level too. But I don't know, man. I don't know. Anyways, we've got lots of football things to talk about today. I did mention NFL Sunday Ticket. They recently had a lawsuit. Well, not they specifically. The NFL had a lawsuit within the NFL Sunday Ticket space where essentially a collection of NFL Sunday Ticket purchasers, account holders came together, said that the way the NFL does their pricing is unfair because they just box out all the local markets. It's a monopoly, and they just set the price at whatever they want. They were right. And the they won. They won. So if you are an NFL Sunday Ticket package holder last year, you are owed a collection of some amount. I don't know exactly how much it is, but
I think it's more than just last year. I think it spans over like the past decade or so. At least one article that I read. So I do know that I actually qualify in this. In 2022, I bought the Sunday Ticket package through or was it Direct TV satellite or something like that? I can't remember exactly, but yeah, I remember paying, I want to say somewhere between the neighborhood of 60 and $70 for it. And like you called it best, Patrick, like the blackouts are what pisses me off the most. It does with the MLB as well, blacking out local markets. But what's really aggravating with Sunday Ticket is they'll black out the nationally televised game in your area. So if you want to switch like back and forth between that national game and whatever like other game for fantasy purposes or whatnot, you basically have to change platforms. Like I can't, or I have to have a second screen set up. So that was the most aggravating thing for me, but we'll see. I'm sure some NFL fans will get paid their cash, I guess, for this. I don't know exactly how you go about it. If you do, please enlighten me because I qualify for this.
So I'm not sure exactly what the steps would be, but I am certain that a quick Google search could help you out with that.
Google always does, doesn't she?
What I can tell you is that the jury in this case found the NFL liable for over $4.5 billion in damages to the residential class home subscribers, so people like you and me, and then just a hair under $100 million in damages to the commercial class, so that's business subscribers. But the NFL could end up being liable for over $14 billion. And they're saying that teams are going to have to pay out their share, where essentially each NFL organization could owe like close to $500 million to NFL Sunday Ticket subscribers. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, dude, it's wild. I wanted to say in some article, and I don't remember exactly, so I can't quote it, and I can't say whether this figure is 100% accurate, but it was like a couple $1,000s that you'd be entitled to if you like joined this NFL lawsuit as a resident, as we are. I want to say like neighborhood of like $3,000 or $4,000 to get back, which is nuts. That if you've just purchased it once in that past however many years time, that you could be eligible for that. And I'm sure that you'd have to go through some sort of legal process. You might have to hire a lawyer of your own, and so that those fees are going to get like taken off with the principal there. But yeah, pretty nuts here, man. I'm glad that at least somebody's cracking down on this, because the blackouts and the monopolization of these streaming services, I think, has gotten out of hand. And I don't know, we're headed like towards other things piggybacking off of this. Amazon, the MLB.TV package has their thing. Netflix is going to carry some games, if not now in the near future. So it's all over, dude.
It's all over. It's all over. The NFL, you are guilty.
Nice little Law and Order throwback there.
Thank you.
Love watching some Law and Order.
Yeah, I had that one holstered in the chamber there for you, Paul. I got you.
Very good. Very good, dude.
So you have homework now. After you go and get your multi-$1,000 stipend or whatever from the NFL, you have to get NFL Sunday Ticket for the pod now, right? Like, for sure.
Of course, if I pull that off, I'll get it for the pod.
Let's go.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that money paid out before this NFL season, but if that's the case, we could just split it this year, and then maybe I'll owe you Sunday Ticket down the road, Patrick. How about that?
Okay, we can make that happen. That happen. All right. That sounds good to me. No need for Santa Paul this year.
Okay.
Santa K-Shack? No, never mind. We're not going to do that bit. Bill Belichick joining the Inside the NFL crew. This comes months after when he and the New England Patriots parted ways. I famously claimed he was going to end up in TV. Hey, guys, guess what? He's now going to be doing 2 shows this year. He's going to be working with Pat McAfee, and he's going to be doing Inside the NFL. There was a great article where he essentially hat-tipped Inside the NFL, claiming citing the history of the organization, the in-depth content they do. related to football. I mean, this thing's been running around for like 48 years, and they've done a bunch of awesome things. Belichick's done several things with them before. When they did the all-time team or the NFL all-time 100 or whatever, he was hugely involved with that with inside the NFL and was phenomenal. I'm really excited for this, way more so than I am the Pat McAfee partnership. So all they got to do now is get Saban and Belichick in the same table, and they'll be doing things right.
Yeah, dude, I still want to have Belichick and Saban like talking on an old man podcast, just about everything. I think we talked about that last year or just a couple months ago when they retired. But I think Bill surprisingly is like pretty decent on camera. I remember him for the draft show. He was solid. Like he's done some stuff with McAfee, like you said. He's got a little bit of a dry humor sense to him type. So I think he should flow pretty well on TV. We'll see. It might be a tad bit awkward at first, but like I think that's the case for a lot of these professional NFL personalities that might go on to sports. I don't know if it's a seamless transition for everybody, but I'm interested to see Bill as well. And obviously the knowledge will be flowing. Like you can have your opinions about the guy himself and everything and some of the Patriots background and whether you like or dislike the Patriots and the dynasty that they were. Like you can't deny the knowledge of football that this guy has. And so it'll be fun to hear what he has to say on TV.
Another recent news piece from the NFL, Jamal Adams, former Seattle Seahawk, former New York Jet, now a Tennessee Titan, signed with the Titans for the league minimum the other day. Paul, you and I spoke about him in our last pod, referencing free agents that were still available. Now Adams is going to be finding a home in Tennessee. He's been plagued by injuries over the last few years. He did sort of mention that going into this year with the Titans, it's a one-year contract, by the way. He mentions that he has a chip on his shoulder. He always has. And that for him this year essentially is going to be about proving himself right, proving to him that he's the player that he knows he can be. I have always loved hearing those kind of quotes from players where they're not necessarily like talking about proving people wrong in like the media space or whatnot, but it's like a self-fulfillment thing more so. I feel like when guys get to that headspace, usually later in their careers, like Adams is, he's 30 now, right? Maybe we see a little bit of a second wind from him. And Tennessee, they've done sort of a roster makeover this year, bringing in Darnell Mooney, bringing in Calvin Ridley as well. Now they've got the new head coach as well. I think Brian Callahan, right? Formerly of the Bengals. Mm-hmm. And now they're going to bring in Adams on the defensive side of the ball, and their sort of scheme definitely matches up to his tendencies as well. I'm kind of excited for what he could be with them if it works out, but I'm not necessarily expecting much from the move overall. Like, just being real, he's got to stay healthy. And if we can see that, then maybe we get a productive Jamal Adams too. But I think they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, right? Like, I don't think because he's going to be healthy, he's automatically going to be this great piece of the Titans defense. But if he can be a contributor and a veteran leader there and play more than 2/3 of the games, then this is going to be a great deal, especially at the league minimum. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a look at it from the Titans perspective first, and then kind of dovetail it back into looking at it from Jamal Adams' perspective. Like, I mean, there's no risk here, like you said. I mean, if you're on the vet min here, the Titans are just paying a little over $1 million. If it doesn't work out, or if he's just injury plagued like he has been the past couple seasons, I mean, so what? I mean, and you just move on. And like, this isn't it's not a long-term commitment, obviously, and this might not be the year for Tennessee anyway. Like, they're still kind of developing at the quarterback position. So it's just kind of a swing and an upside play, I think, for Tennessee, and we'll see if it works out. From Jamal Adams' point of view, I mean, his mindset has to be not only, just trying to prove to himself that he can still play this game at a high level, but I'm sure he has his eyes on at least like one more contract. Obviously, it's not going to be as big as, what he's been paid in the past, but like if he can get one more deal for a couple years and, maybe like bank $5 to $10 million a year or something like that, if he can have a solid season and like stay on the field, like you said, at least 2/3 of the games, that's probably his mindset as well going into it. And in that sense, there is probably a lot of internal pressure, right? Because when you have only played 10 games over the past 2 seasons, who's going to pay you more than the vet minimum until you prove that you can stay healthy and that you can stay on the field. And then, like you said, like, that's one thing. Does he come back and does he resemble himself from 5-6 years ago? Like, probably not. But if it's something close, an NFL team might bite going into the 2025 season. So all the best to him. I mean, he hasn't played a full season since his first 2 years in the league. And like I said, only 10 games over the past 2. So I'm skeptical about whether he can stay out there. But it's hard. Like, the Titans have a lot of name value, and I won't like talk about them too much because we'll do our team breakdowns and divisions and in the episodes to come. But Calvin Ridley, like Jeffrey Simmons on the defensive side of the ball, Jamal Adams. I think that there is talent at the quarterback position, albeit very raw and undeveloped, and Will Levis, and then maybe Mason Rudolph if you need. So I think Tennessee is a very wild card in that division. It's a tough division, but we'll see how things work out in this season.
On the Calvin Ridley note, I've always been like more of a Calvin Ridley seller than a buyer. He did, after all, help contribute to Trevor Lawrence having just an unreal amount of dropped touchdowns last year. I think more than anybody else in the league. And we've seen flashes of him being awesome, but I think he's not as good as what people like really think he is, if that makes sense. And
I think that people like, so I struggle with this myself.
They latch onto him so hard. It's like the same thing with Jerry Jeudy in Denver. I feel like just because he played at an SEC school and they have that like track record of having guys pan out, people just sort of expect him to.
Well, what I mean? With Calvin Ridley, like, it's not the worst comparison there, but that's not the one I would have thought of, because Calvin Ridley did have like a dynamite season in Atlanta. He did have like one really, really good season in Atlanta, whereas I don't really feel like Jerry Jeudy has had any like Pro Bowl type or any breakout year in the NFL yet. But what I was going to say is, like, I do feel like people who do back Ridley, and I was this person up until last year. Now I kind of don't know what to think about him. Like, they were just latching on to one season of success. And there are sometimes like guys in the NFL have just 1 or 2 good seasons. I mean, they're solid players for that year, but that doesn't mean like they're solid NFL players. Like, it's just the nature of sports sometimes. So that's one perspective, and it's one that I'm struggling with now. But I also think when you look on the flip side of Calvin Ridley, and yes, last year was not quite what I think that like fantasy managers would have hoped for, not what Jacksonville Jaguars fans would have hoped for from him. But you do have to acknowledge that this was a guy that was basically hadn't played 2 years prior, because he had missed most of the 2021 season because of like personal issues, and then 2022 suspended for gambling, and then last year we finally get him back. So that's to be taken into account.
What was the name of the Steelers DB who got suspended recently for the domestic violence thing?
Cam Sutton.
8 games? For 8 games, beating up his wife and strangling her and throwing her out the window of his house, when Calvin Ridley gets a year for gambling.
I know that's I've seen comparisons like that run wild.
Come on.
I agree. The NFL's got their priorities like all mixed up on that. I mean,
it's ridiculous.
I can't understand, and not just pigeonhole it to NFL, but like if you go and like I saw a preview for a Pete Rose HBO documentary as well, so that's why I'm kind of bringing multiple sports into this. I understand that professional sports like are very concerned about gambling, because like it does reduce the integrity of the game. It is an entertainment business, and that can sabotage, if people are gambling on their sport, that can sabotage the authentic nature of what fans are watching.
Yeah, I'm not trying to like bring down the seriousness of that.
But you're right. It's not, it's when you look at it, thing A and thing B, when you're talking about, domestic violence versus, hitting some buttons on the FanDuel app, you're right. I don't know how you justify like comparing a full year suspension to just like 8 games. So I do think the priority is a little messed up in that regard.
It's just like, I don't know, man. It just grinds my gears a little bit. I'm trying to find it on my phone right now, but I can't. I saw a post recently about the teams in the NFL with like the most arrested players or the least arrested players on their rosters currently. And I thought it would be funny to like just have a game where you pit the most versus the least, like head to head, in like a prison rule style game, and just like see what happens.
Who knows, man? I don't know. I don't even know who the most and least arrested teams are.
I saw a post about it. I don't remember where it was. It might be on Twitter or something. I'll try to find it. But available free agents that are still out there before we move on. Kareem Hunt and Dalvin Cook, couple running backs. Kareem Hunt, I definitely think could find a home somewhere. I'm actually sort of surprised somebody doesn't already have him in a multi-back backfield. You know what I mean? Because he just fits there like he did last year in Cleveland. Cook, I understand people being a little skeptical about. Hunter Renfrow and Michael Thomas, the famous Michael Thomas. We'll talk about him a little bit more later. Shaq Leonard, Xavier Howard, Stephon Gilmore. We talked a little bit about him last pod. Justin Jefferson. Not Justin Jefferson.
Justin Jefferson.
Jesus Christ.
I was about to say that man
Patrick
just signed
Peterson.
a fat contract. He is no free agent.
Patrick Peterson. My bad.
There you go.
That's not who I meant. Patrick Peterson. Then we also have Justin Simmons on there. Definitely the most talented player on this list at this point. And then we also have Eddie Jackson on there, former Chicago Bear. So there's certainly a few guys still available that could be contributing factors. The safeties, Jackson and Simmons, are probably the most perplexing guys that are still out there. You got to think eventually they'll find a home, but I don't know. It's a little weird. Justin Simmons, especially, like, he's probably the best safety in the game, or one of them at least.
I wouldn't go so far as to say the best safety in the game, but I mean, this is a guy who still like was just an all pro just like a year or two ago, if I remember correct. Like, this is a guy who's still playing at a high level. And like, I understand the Broncos not really kind of within their situation right now, not trying to pursue him or bring him back. But yeah, I'm shocked some team hasn't tried to find a home for him yet, but maybe the asking price is a little bit too high for his age. I don't know. And if sometimes who NFL teams pursue and who they leave out there on the free agent market kind of perplexes me more and more year by year. But so he definitely is the one that makes me scratch my head the most. The other two guys that you brought up that I did have a comment on before we move on or anything like that are the running backs, Kareem Hunt and Dalvin Cook. I definitely think those guys are gonna find homes. I just think it'll happen closer to training camp, or maybe once training camp already begins. Like we saw that with Dalvin Cook last year with the Jets. And then if you remember, Kareem Hunt didn't actually sign with the Browns until the Chubb injury happened, or maybe like a week or two after. So I don't know if it'll necessarily take Hunt that long this year to find a home, but I think those guys are just going to wait until like an advantageous or an opportune injury by somebody in camp, and they'll kind of slot in right there and go from there. So we kind of won't know what'll happen until it does, so to speak. But I wouldn't expect those guys to move until maybe like mid-August or something like that.
I think I agree with you to that sentiment. Like, I can just picture both these guys as like week 5 waiver wire ads after some running back gets hurt. Like, it just
that too. You're right. Yeah,
it just makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
Some poor soul is gonna drop $30 on one of these guys in a waiver auction when it's very evidently clear one of them will be signed.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised though. I mean, if we look up, like you said, middle of the fantasy season, and Dalvin Cook or Kareem Hunt are like being put in flex spots. I mean, it happens every year. Wouldn't be shocked.
We also have to pay homage a little bit to Jacoby Jones and Monte Kiffin, a couple of gentlemen involved in the game of football who passed away recently. Jacoby Jones passed away today, actually, this morning. Very surprisingly, it's sort of unclear what the cause of death was, but his family said that he passed away peacefully in his home in New Orleans. Jacoby Jones, famous for the Mile High Miracle during the Ravens playoff run that led to Joe Flacco being elite forever. Also had the kick return touchdown in the Super Bowl against 49ers. He had 2 touchdowns in that game. I think he was actually the MVP of that game, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
Flacco was.
You're right. Yeah. You're right. My apologies. But that was sad to see. I know he played for a rival of your team, Paul, but you probably have a few memories of games against him from that sort of era, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, I remember him primarily as like punt kick returner. Definitely a dynamic talent and somebody that like once
Didn't
he
he
had the
play with
ball.
the Steelers before he retired?
Yeah, he had a brief stint with us, if I remember correct. He didn't play many games, and but I am pretty sure he had a brief stint with us as well. And then obviously, like I'm glad it wasn't against the Steelers, but like the Mile High Miracle is obviously like got to be the pinnacle of his career. He was a good NFL player, but like not spectacular or anything like that. So that play is just so iconic, and for Baltimore to come back and pull that upset, that's like that like I think is really the defining moment of that playoff run, like and
For
beating
sure.
Peyton Manning in Denver in Mile High that year. So, and obviously Jones was at the forefront of that. So I will remember that about him most vividly. And then if I remember correct too, I think he was the guy with the ball in the infamous
Tomlin trip.
Tomlin standing on the
Tomlin
field.
trip.
I think Jacoby Jones was the guy with the ball returning.
He
So
was.
I'll remember
He was.
that as well. Yeah.
He was.
Yeah.
100%. Tomlin's the best, man.
So I give Tomlin a lot of crap, but that I'm like, dude, I mean,
That's
whether
so awesome.
his explanation, he claims that he watches the returns on video, and so like it's mirrored. So he thought he was on the opposite sideline of where the action was happening. I don't know if I believe that or not, but I'll tell you this: it helped prevent, at least on that play, the touchdown scored. So I respect the hell out of that from Mike T.
You're telling me that Tomlin, like, all of a sudden just has the worst depth perception on the face of the planet
No,
and
it's
can't
it's
tell
not.
that Jacoby Jones is running right at him.
It's not a depth perception thing. It's so he claims what Mike Tomlin has claimed. I've seen multiple like interviews about this. He claims that he watches all of the returns not like on the field. It's easier to see what's happening if he's watching on the jumbotron, right?
Oh,
And so the
okay.
jumbotron is like the way that it displays it.
Oh,
It's
I
like
see what you're
it's
saying.
like opposite, or when you're looking at it, it's mirrored from what actually is happening on the field.
Yeah.
So I can't remember. I think Jones is running down like the left sideline. So Tomlin is on the left sideline, but the jumbotron is like showing him run down the right sideline. So Tomlin thinks the whole time the play's happening on the opposite side of the field until like Jones comes right in the shot, and it's too late to do anything by then.
Mike Tomlin apologist, Paul Kashak. Never thought I'd see today.
That play, I respect Mike T for that. You got to do what you got to do to help win.
Never saw that. Never thought I'd see today. I mean, this is
Yeah.
like, we need more coming together between the two of you, honestly. Like,
Yeah, I guess so.
just gonna play Why Can't We Be Friends by War every time you guys start arguing from now on, and maybe you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Jacoby Jones. Rest in peace as well to Monte Kiffin, father of Lane Kiffin, legendary defensive coordinator in the college space. He coached at Nebraska, Arkansas. He was the head coach at North Carolina State for a while. Then he ended up in the NFL space as well. He was defensive coordinator with the Vikings, the New Orleans Saints, Tampa Bay Buccaneers when they won their Super Bowl title in the early 2000s. Then he ended up back in the college space with Tennessee. He was most recently the defensive coordinator in the NFL with the Cowboys in 2013. And then he was the assistant head coach for defense in 2014. He's served with Ole Miss as a player personnel analyst each of the last few years. Certainly sad to see. Lane Kiffin's one of my favorite personality coaches, and I'm a fan of his dad's as well. So to see him pass away, it's pretty sad, man. There's more and more titans of the game, of the last era of the game, getting older, and it's really sad to see. Not just in football, but like Willie Mays passed away in baseball. That was really sad too. Like, it's weird, man. Just getting older and seeing people sort of fade. Not to get like morbid or anything, but especially like within the sports setting, like as a kid, people always seem like they're superheroes, like they're immortal, when in reality they're not.
Yeah, I don't have any like personal memories of Monte Kiffin, but I do know like the 2002 Bucks team that won the Super Bowl. That team, I think that they were just dominant. And I know
Warren
I think they had,
Sapp,
yeah,
Derek Brooks.
I think they had 2 defensive touchdowns that helped power him to that Super Bowl win. So obviously being the DC there had a large part of it. So very sad, obviously, when anybody who's been in the game as long as he has passes away. It's sad that both those guys have passed away in such a short window of time. But you're right, like as you grow older, it is unfortunate, but there are more and more names that you recognize and that you recognize like from growing up and recognize watching that do pass on. And it's the sad reality of life, I guess.
Rest in peace, Jacoby Jones, Monte Kiffin. Thank you for your contributions to the game of football. We got to pivot now, though, ladies and gentlemen. The perfect segue to the NFL head coach draft. This is something I'm excited for. We did something kind of similar recently where we did a head coach quarterback partnership draft, like a duo draft where you're drafting both the coach and the quarterback at the same time. This is a little bit different. This is just going off the head coaches. So there's a little bit more clarity for how Paul and I feel about the coaches of the NFL specifically right now. Paul, in this draft, we're going to do snake style. We can coin flip or something for who gets first pick. I don't remember who got first pick last time. Actually, I can look it up.
You can have first pick if you like.
I had first pick last time. You can have it if you want.
I would rather have the two, like if we're going to do snake style, I'd rather have the second pick so that I could also get the third.
Okay.
In this situation.
Okay. Word. We can do that. Okay. We can do that. I am not including any first year head coaches in this year's draft pool for obvious reasons. And then I'm not including Dan Quinn or Raheem Morris only because we haven't seen them as head coaches in a while. If you want, we can both include them on here, but I don't think either of us are going to be picking those guys in our top like 5 or maybe 10. I would.
Nah, I don't have either.
Exactly. So 10, we can leave them out for the sake of giving them a fair chance their first year back in some time, if that makes sense.
All right.
So I'm picking first. I would be just stupid to not pick Andy Reid. Like, I mean,
slam dunk.
Yeah, we did this last time as well, where we sort of talked about it's unfair that the Chiefs have both Reid and Mahomes. It's like you get the number 1 overall at both those positions, and they're the 2 most crucial positions of your franchise. People said it all the time about Belichick and Brady back in the day, but now it's like pretty unequivocal. There's no Peyton Manning in the argument. There's no like Tony Dungy or whoever else you want to throw in there. I don't know who the great comp would have been for Belichick back in the day, but now it's like Reid 100%. He's on pace perhaps to even beat Belichick in all-time wins if Belichick never comes back to coaching. He's got 258 regular season wins currently, including the postseason. He has another 26, and he's an innovator offensively. I have this sort of belief that while Mahomes is a phenomenal player, Reid is like the perfect complementary coach for him too. Like having a guy that can just come up with creativity the way that we see from Reid. I mean, he did it with McNabb, with the Eagles as well. He did it with Alex Smith. Awesome coach, unequivocal number 1 choice. There's really not much else I could say. I could rant about him, how good he is for another 10 minutes, but I'll save you the time. And you're next, Paul.
Yeah, like that. Honestly, Andy Reid was one of also the reasons that I didn't want to have the number 1 pick because like it's so obvious. There's less. It's like less to really think about and talk about. But absolutely so deserving. 3 Super Bowls now and still cooking. Like he'll have at least another couple under his belt by the end of things. It just kind of depends. Yeah, it depends on how long he kind of wants to stick it out. Obviously, he's got the best quarterback in the world right now. He's got a phenomenal offense. He's got a great scheme to fit it, like you said. So easy number 1 pick, not much more to say there. All right. So now this is, I think, where the draft starts to get a little bit interesting. And my 2-3 here, I'm just going to lump them in together as I'm not really even going to specify who's 2, who's 3. I think that these guys are kind of cut from the same cloth. They're both offensive style guys. They're both extremely talented offensive minds. Both of them have been to a Super Bowl. One of them has won it. And those guys, if you can't put 2 and 2 together from that, is Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan. I'll talk about Shanahan first real quick. I don't think it was the best game plan that he had in the Super Bowl a couple months back. Maybe not necessarily a terrible one. And he's always had good players, but like this guy is as brilliant of an offensive mind almost as they come. Schemes up guys wide open. and really had he took a team that had a quarterback in Brock Purdy, who was in his first full season in the NFL, coming off of being drafted just the year prior, and took them to the Super Bowl. They're always in the playoffs. He's been to the Super Bowl twice, and it's only been by the hand of Patrick Mahomes, who's the best quarterback in football, to beat him. So, I mean, maybe if he's not facing a generational talent, he's got at least one Super Bowl. So I think it's pretty easy to put him in there. And then Sean McVay, also one of the great offensive minds of our generation. All you have to do is look up an interview about him and talk about the one that sticks out to me is he's talking about last year where the Steelers beat the Rams and TJ Watt intercepted a ball, and just go back and Google or go into YouTube and type in Sean McVay talks about TJ Watt interception. It's his knowledge of the game and where guys are supposed to be is off the charts, and the terminology he uses is crazy. It's not something even myself, who's watched football since I was 5, could say that I understand. But he's won a Super Bowl. Good team that he had as well, but I mean, nothing to take away from him. So those guys are, I think, both really at the top of their games, and they're very young too, which is another scary thing. They have a long career ahead of them if they want it. So McVay and Shanahan at 2-3.
So just to be clear, you're picking McVay 2, Shanahan 3?
Technically, yeah, I will go McVay 2. He has the Super Bowl, so I'll give him the edge.
Is it only because of the Super Bowl? Outside of the Super Bowl itself, was there any other separating factors for you putting McVay over Shanahan?
No, it's really just the Super Bowl. They've both been to the Super Bowl twice. I think that they've both done well, it's tough for me to say well with lesser talent when it comes to Shanahan, but I think getting to the NFC Championship last year with Brock Purdy in his rookie season, or 2 years ago technically, and then this past year again with a quarterback that's still developing, getting to the Super Bowl, and then McVay getting there with Goff, who wasn't the player that he is now. Extremely impressive.
Hell, Shanahan got there with Jimmy G.
Jimmy G too, yeah. Didn't even throw that out there. So they can do it. They can do it with anybody. You can pull a Joe Schmo off the bench, and literally, because it's happened, and they get it done.
It would be hard for me to your point, it would be hard for me to flip those two, have Shanahan at 2 and McVay 3, but I want to, but I won't. I will feign that urge. I will resist, and I will hold steadfast.
Yeah, I don't have much of an argument if you did. I think that they're both phenomenal in their own right, but at the end of the day, Super Bowls are Super Bowls, so McVay gets a slight edge.
I think Shanahan has, the interesting thing is they come from the same coaching tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could make an argument maybe about
they were on the same Washington at the time, so I'm not racist when I say this. It was called Redskins at the time. They were on the same Washington Redskins coaching staff back in 2011 or something.
Thanks for clarifying, by the way.
Yeah, way back.
Oh man, yeah, it's really interesting, and there's other guys that we're gonna draft here that were on that staff as well. I'm picking 4th and 5th, and I'm gonna go to the AFC North here. I'm gonna pick John Harbaugh 4, and then I'm gonna pick Kevin Stefanski 5. Harbaugh, I mean, the infrastructure in Baltimore has been there now for over a decade, longer than that, since the late 2000s, since he took over, or early 2010s, late 2000s, and Baltimore's been competitive ever since. Both sides of the ball. Offensively, they play in a really unique sort of lens because they have a guy like Lamar running the show who's so multi-talented. And that's not easy. Having that sort of tool to work with and use it as effectively as you can. I don't think that's as easy as people say it is, right? Because he leads you to an offense that's atypical for most you see in the NFL that leads to success, right? Typically. I love Harbaugh there. I think it makes sense. He's one of the active winningest coaches in the league. He's currently 4th in terms of overall wins among active coaches. The only coaches ahead of him would be McCarthy, Tomlin, and Reed. And he's got a ring. So I think you could actually make an argument for him going third as well. Like, if you had put him in that top 3, I would not have faulted you for it. I would have been maybe slightly surprised, but I think that these guys being in the top 4, Reed, McVay, Shanahan, Harbaugh, is very I think I think we got it right. As long as it's that, like those 4 with Reed being at the top, whatever the next 3 orders out as, I'm totally okay with. My 5, Kevin Stefanski, won Coach of the Year last year, has been the main reason behind Cleveland's turnaround from the joke of the NFL for more than 20 years to being now a frisky, like, I don't want to say contender, but they were in the mix last year. They were a really tough beat for most teams. Had it not been for Flacco laying a dud in the playoffs, maybe they fare a little bit better against the Texans. Like, you don't see teams make the playoffs when they have to use 4 quarterbacks as a starter in the year. And, oh, by the way, they lost their all-pro running back for the year at the beginning of the season as well. Like, that's one of the hardest hands you can get dealt as a head coach. And somehow Stefanski navigated through that to a winning record, albeit not just a winning record, a playoff spot, double-digit wins, albeit with Joe Flacco coming back, being the comeback player of the year. Like, not comeback player of the year. I'm sorry, it was Baker. But I do think it's
no, Joe Flacco was comeback player of the year.
He was comeback player of the year.
Yeah, you got it right. Yep.
Comeback player of the year, Joe Flacco. Thank you. I
anyone but DeMar Hamlin comeback player of the year.
Seriously. Did you see the thing at the ESPYs where when Steve Gleason was giving his speech, he talked about like how he almost definitely should have been dead by now, and then the camera automatically cuts to DeMar Hamlin and his sunglasses.
I've only seen one cut or one clip from the ESPYs. It was just Nikki Glazer making fun of the Oilers for not winning the Stanley Cup.
Oh,
but
man.
that's the only thing I've seen. I'm not a big ESPYs guy. I don't really like.
Who's Nikki Glazer?
Nikki Glazer is the one who she's the woman who was at the Brady roast. She's a comedian, blonde hair.
No, don't know her.
You didn't watch the Brady roast?
No, I actually haven't.
Oh, okay. Well, never. You might. I didn't really know who she was until then, but yeah, she's a comedian.
No, I haven't watched the Brady roast. I probably will at some point. I just haven't yet. I don't know. But yeah, Stefanski 5, best coach besides the top 4. I don't know how he pulls some of the stuff that he does. I mean, you could even say with Deshaun Watson there too, like that's been about as unclear of a starting quarterback situation as anybody's had in the last few years.
Still is.
Still really, is. In my opinion. Yeah, it still could be this year. I mean, we don't know what they're going to be dealing with offensively. We don't know what Nick Chubb's going to be next year. And I still have them as a team with a winning record again in 2024-25 this year. So I feel strongly about those two at 4 and 5, but you have picks 6 and 7, my friend. Just to recap, the top 5 coaches in the NFL, according to our draft: Andy Reid 1, Sean McVay 2, Kyle Shanahan 3, John Harbaugh, not Jim, at 4, and 5, Kevin Stefanski of the Cleveland Browns. Paul, you are on the clock.
Yeah. So, my guy at 6, I'm pretty confident, very confident in fact. And then the guy at 7, I'm confident in, but I just think it might turn a little bit of heads. And I'll explain why. So at 6, I'm going to go Matt LaFleur here. I think that LaFleur and Jordan Love, I had them extremely high on that quarterback coach combination draft that we did a couple episodes back. And anybody who's listening to this podcast knows that I am very high on the Green Bay Packers next year and the years to come. Look, I know that LaFleur wasn't quite able to get it done with Aaron Rodgers and the tail end of things there, even though Aaron Rodgers was still pumping out MVP seasons in Green Bay. But what LaFleur is able to do now with a new quarterback and really in Love's first full year, get him playing at an extremely high level, get to the playoffs and win on the road. I think the sky's the limit here. Cut from, again, similar coaching tree to McVay, Shanahan. Offense is the name of the game in today's NFL. Like we see it, like Mahomes or Reed has a great scheme for Mahomes. Like Shanahan and McVay have great schemes. And I think LaFleur has a phenomenal scheme for his young quarterback in Jordan Love too. So I'm very impressed with LaFleur. I think that the Packers are going to go far this year, and you can now smoke cigarettes in Lambeau Field. So that's really cool too.
Wait,
Yeah, go ahead.
before you take the other hardball.
I'm not, but
before you do, but you're not. Before you do,
okay.
should we also throw him out of the pool since he's kind of in that Quinn Morris category of he hasn't for a while?
I'm not Jim Harbaugh is not the guy I'm taking next, but I do have him in my top 10. So like I think that he's warranted. I mean, the guy's been to a Super Bowl.
I would probably
I
have
guess
him
so
around
is
there
Dan
too.
Quinn.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying though. I feel like it's unfair to throw them out, but also not throw out Harbaugh because
I mean, we could keep Morris and Quinn in there. I'm not going to have them for a while, but I have Harbaugh on I think Harbaugh's the top 10 coach. So
all right, fuck it. We'll keep Quinn and Morris in there too. Let's throw them in the mix. Cool. All right, so who's your next pick? Sorry.
So 7. This might turn a little bit of heads, and there's not a whole ton of pedigree to this guy. Just hasn't been in the league that long, but like it's hard to not be impressed with DeMeco Ryans. I thought DeMeco Ryans
good pick.
I thought DeMeco Ryans should have been not taking anything away from Kevin Stefanski. I do think that he did a phenomenal coaching job with Cleveland last year, but I actually thought DeMeco Ryans should have been the coach of the year.
He finished second.
I know he finished second, and I think that like part of it was because I think he probably had a little bit taken away from him in terms of that vote because Stroud is so good, and I think that the tendency in today's NFL is to like give a lot more of the credit to the quarterback and not as much to the head coach, which is justified, I guess, because the quarterback's out on the field playing there. But let's not forget the Texans had the second pick overall in the 2023 NFL draft. They were not supposed to be good in 2023. Okay. Stroud exceeded everybody's expectations. The defense was solid. It's going to get better. Guys like Will Anderson. They bring in, we talked about him from Minnesota last year. Yeah. Daniel Hunter. Sorry. So I think there's going to be talent on both sides of the ball. And like, yeah, Stroud was really good, but there wasn't really too much talent around him. I have to give the head coach a little bit of credit here. I'm going to DeMeco Ryans at 7. Maybe I'm overreacting to one season, but he's already got a playoff win under his belt. Like, I think the sky's the limit for that coaching
against Kevin Stefanski too.
Like, yeah. So there you go.
That's a solid head-to-head chess match.
Yep.
And it was pretty. I mean, Flacco was terrible in that game, but it was pretty unequivocal that the Texans were the better team.
Yeah.
Good pick, because I was really considering him, including him in my next 2.
Yeah, like I do admit, and if people like would argue with it, like I do admit it's tough that like he's got one NFL season, albeit a very good one, but like is one season justifying him at the top 10? I really like him, so I'm gonna put him there. But if someone's gonna make that argument, I get it, like I do. But I got him at number 7.
Wow. Okay, so now I'm on the clock. This is where I feel like things get a little tougher. I'm gonna go Tomlin 8 because he is one of the winningest active coaches in the league. Recently extended, by the way. He's got a Super Bowl ring, and it's hard to never have a losing season in what everybody says is the toughest division in football, at least the fans of any of the teams in it, especially Steelers fans.
I'll tell you where I had Tomlin after you finish your rundown on him and why you have him there. I'll tell you where I had him on my list because I think that people got to know.
I think you have to have him at least close to the top 10. If not in the top 10, I think you can't have him far out of it. Where did you have him?
I had him at 14 on my list. So I had him
14. I
had him right around like a slightly above average NFL head coach because I think that's the record that he pumps out pretty much every year.
Man, he's above average. The quarterbacks he's had a winning record with the last 2 years, though. Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph. Like, come on, man. Like, that's not entirely fair to him. Like, I understand your argument for maybe not winning Super Bowls in a town that expects it and the playoff record. He doesn't have a winning record in the playoff anymore. But maintaining a winning record for this amount of time in the NFL, it's not something everybody does. He's now the most tenured head coach in the league too. Like, I think that speaks for something in a league that harbors itself on turnover at that position if things aren't going right. Like, it's only been until the last couple of years that people, I think, have really been clamoring for change, or at least certain circles of Steelers fans. You might say differently. I don't know, man. To me, like, there's just not many coaches I could justify taking ahead of him. 8. Now, 9 is where I think it gets interesting because I'm sort of debating between two guys, and I'm going to go with Dan Campbell 9. And I don't know if I feel awesome about
It's exactly where I had him too.
Yeah. Okay, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, I had him at 9.
That makes me feel
agree
better.
with that. Yeah.
I was between him and one other, and I'm not going to say his name because I have a feeling you'll probably pick him in one of your next 2 choices. I'll just let you know when you do bring him up. But for Campbell, like similar to what I talked about with Stefanski and being sort of the spearhead of flipping that organization around, Campbell's been the same in Detroit, and he has been nothing short of spectacular there in terms of putting the right mindset in the guys, and the front office is a big part of it too, because they've given him a stack deck in terms of loading him up with like St. Brown and Hutchinson and Laporta and Gibbs, and even going and getting Goff too was a pretty ballsy move that's paid off. I mean, I know Stafford has the ring now in LA, but that was partly because he got paired with McVay and Cooper Kupp, who had that special season, and they had all those other tools as well, like Aaron Donald and whatnot. Detroit just wasn't there yet, and Goff has been a huge part of that as well. But Campbell, for me, like, we've had moments on this podcast where we've criticized him heavily for decisions he makes in game, but at the same time, those decisions pay off a lot and have been a big part of the reason why the Lions have had their success. He's an unconventional coach, and he's a fiery guy, and when I hate him, I hate him. But when I love him, I freaking love that guy. And I would love to play for him too, probably, except for when he goes for 4 consecutive times and we lose to the Cowboys on prime time. Then I might be pissed. Or give up a 20+ point lead on the road to the Niners with a game of the Super Bowl game on the line. You know, like, I don't know if I love it. This is where I feel like every pick we're going to think a little bit more about who the next guy is, but I'm going to stick with it. Tomlin 8, Campbell 9. I love that D'Amico Ryans goes at 7 before both of those guys, because it was something I was scared to do. But I think you could even make an argument for Ryan being like ahead of LaFleur too. Like, I think you could make an argument for him being in that top 5, top 6, and we'll see it this year depending on how Houston plays. Paul, you're up at 10 and 11, unless you have any sort of rebuttal to my Dan Campbell manifestation there.
No, it's really interesting. For Dan Campbell, like, I had the exact same thought process as you. Like, emotionally, like, seems like a guy you'd love to play for. Clearly, Detroit did. What he's done just psychologically to turn around that fan base and that city that's been so used to losing over the years, that is all credit to him. I think it's just the in-game decisions that got to be a little bit smarter. And sometimes what I will say with Dan Campbell and kind of all coaches, like, he hasn't been a head coach for very long. It's only been a couple years. Sometimes getting a feel for when you actually should go for it and not happens multiple years down the road. And I think there is something to be said for that. And I think that smarter decisions in game could be on the horizon for him. But, you know, the love of the game and getting his players motivated and getting them to follow him, there is no question about that. Mike Tomlin, we could go on for hours and hours about that one. So I'll let sleeping dogs lie. He is extended. So I hope that can you at least admit this with Mike Tomlin?
Wait, okay. Yeah, we never really talked about that when it happened. What was your initial reaction when you saw it? Like, did you kick a coffee table or something?
I didn't kick a coffee table.
Go step on some Legos barefoot?
So I knew the Steelers do not like any of their coaches to be lame duck coaches, is what they call it. So I knew that at least a 1-year extension was coming. Like, they never want their head coach to be going into a season like knowing that the contract expires after that and that there's nothing after. I was surprised that it's a 3-year extension. I thought 1, like 2 max. That was interesting to me. It
shows they have faith in him, Paul.
I wouldn't have done it. Yeah, I mean, it does, but something better happened now with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, because you can't keep making excuses that the quarterbacks aren't good enough. Like,
well, let me pose you a question, not to cut you off, but like, playing in a conference where your 4 other teams in the conference have Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Like, you can't tell me realistically you are expecting a Super Bowl run. You can tell me you expect a playoff win.
I'm expecting, yes, a singular playoff win at least. I mean, that hasn't happened in 7 years. That's what I'm.
That's not on Tomlin though. That's
who
like
would it be on then?
You got to have a guy throwing the ball who can get you there too. And I think Tomlin helps you get to the playoffs at least.
Well, they have had that. It's only been the last like 2 years that they haven't. They keep in mind this team failed to win playoff games with Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, and Ben Roethlisberger. Also failed to make the playoffs in a year in 2018 when Ben Roethlisberger led the league in passing. Yeah. I'm just saying, we can. There are multiple sides of the coin. I think Tomlin is a guy. Tomlin is a guy, and he's warranted. And the reason that, like, I still think in technicality, yes, he's an above average coach, is because I think Tomlin does little with a lot, and he does more with less. And that's a frustrating type of guy sometimes. And it's interesting there. And it's like the national media and like you to a degree, not just you pigeonholing you, but just people in general, focus on what he has done, like with Mason Rudolph, with Kenny Pickett, etc. And it's like just 5-6 years ago.
The recency bias.
It's like, why were we losing to Blake Bortles in the divisional round with AB, Le'Veon Bell, and Ben? It's like stuff like that. Why were we not making the playoffs the following year in 2018?
Hey, that team was a Stephon Gilmore diving spot away from playing for a Super Bowl too.
I guess, yeah. I mean, it wasn't a terrible Jacksonville team, but like the point is, like, also that's the other thing. Like, you can't just keep making excuses like, oh, well, there's other teams that are better. Like,
yeah, I know what you're saying. No, that's
Tomlin rant over.
That's a fair argument.
Tomlin rant over.
There it is. I've been waiting on that since the news dropped. Actually.
Patrick, we have the whole season coming up. Believe me, there will be a bad Steelers Sunday, and I'll get on the next Monday, and I'll just lose my mind. So be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, well, when we do our division previews and talk about the Steelers for a little
bit, when it'll really get interesting.
That's going to be interesting. I can't wait for that conversation. All right, back to your picks at 10 and 11.
I've
back
got
to the NFL head coach draft.
I've got 10, 11 here. Okay. At 10, I'm going to go Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson is an interesting character here. I think that in the past few years, I sometimes don't know exactly how to rate him. Let's go back to his days in Philly real quick, right? Guy won a Super Bowl against Tom Brady with the combination of Carson Wentz and Nick Foles. Now, I get it that Carson Wentz played out of his mind that year and was playing it at MVP level before he tore his ACL. But come on, man, when you look back on things, Wentz and Foles got them to and won a Super Bowl against Tom Brady. That's crazy. Then Doug Peterson has a couple bad years in Philly, and he's out just a few years later. Philadelphia has shown a very short memory in the front office when it comes to that. Then he goes to Jacksonville and completely turns around what looked like a dumpster fire after year one with Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer. Got to give him a ton of credit for that. Got them to the playoffs and got a playoff win as well, coming back from down near 30, and had the Chiefs kind of on the ropes in the divisional round. If you remember, that was the Patrick Mahomes sprained ankle game. So It's like, had a shot to win that game too. Ton of credit there. But then it's a similar story to how things tailed off in Philly after he won the Super Bowl this past year. Extremely down year for the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. And I think part of that had to do with some injuries that Lawrence dealt with throughout the year. But like, there was plenty of talent on this team. Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley didn't always come through. You obviously have Travis Etienne in the backfield. This was a team that should have made the playoffs, collapsed down the stretch. And so that's why I can't put him too much higher than 10. The guy's got a Super Bowl ring, and he's won playoff games in multiple spots. I think he's at least deserving of top 10. And then 11, 12 is very tough, but I'm going to go with another guy who is probably a polarizing figure here, but he's won a Super Bowl. I'm going to go with Mike McCarthy.
That was the guy I was debating with Campbell and him.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Mike. I'm going to go with Mike McCarthy here. That Super Bowl, and like the same thing I bring up with Tomlin. It was a long time ago. I mean, we're talking about like a decade ago now. Over that, I think. Yeah, it's coming up on like 14 years since the Packers won Super Bowl 45. And Aaron Rodgers, Hall of Fame, MVP talent. You could say maybe a lot of coaches could win a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers, even though McCarthy is the only one to win it. But has to be deserving there and, beat Mike Tomlin, another coach that you have high on this list in that Super Bowl. So can't take away from him. I think that he's put together good rosters and he's had good regular season success pretty consistently. The Cowboys have been a really good team in the regular season the past 2-3 years. It's been once they get to the playoffs, man. They look terrible against Green Bay in that playoff game last year, and you can't take away from it. So I think that there is an element similar to Mike Tomlin where Mike McCarthy kind of falls flat on his face, at least as of late in the playoffs, but he does have that Super Bowl ring. So I'll put him here at 11.
Okay. So Doug Peterson and Mike McCarthy. McCarthy, I get. Peterson, even though he has the Super Bowl ring, the talent on that Philadelphia roster was unbelievable. Like they had every piece they needed to win, except for the obvious star quarterback. But he's such a great offensive-minded coach. I mean, people have called him the quarterback whisperer for I don't know how long. Like it kind of just goes hand in hand. And I will say, with Lawrence getting his recent extension, the AFC South is going to get tougher over the next couple of years. If Jacksonville takes a few steps back, it's not going to be the guy who just got a whole bag of money, maybe a few bags of money thrown at him, who gets the blame if things go bad. It's going to be Peterson. Yep. And that could happen in the next 2 years, maybe even this year, if Jacksonville.
Oh, it's a pressure year coming up for him. Yeah, they have to be better for him. His job security, whether it be this upcoming year or the years going forward, it has to be better than last year. It has to. It has to be at least a playoff appearance, and you got to make a little bit of noise. Trevor Lawrence is a 1-1, said to be like one of the best quarterback prospects we've seen in the last 15, 20 years. It has to be better than missing the playoffs and collapsing down the stretch.
Jacksonville, perhaps the next destination for Mike Tomlin in a few years. Maybe.
I think the next destination for Mike Tomlin is TV, personally. Similar to how.
Okay, Bill interesting. A lot like another sort of like one team guy sort of thing.
I think there's a lot of places would like him. I mean, his Tomlinisms and everything like that. Like he does speak well, so I think he'd pair well on like a Fox or like a CBS like a Sunday morning type thing.
Yeah. Okay, I could see that. I could definitely see that. I am up at 12 and 13. This is, I think, where things get really tough. There's a lot of guys on this list that I don't necessarily feel confident picking. But guys, I can't not pick either. So I'm going to have to pick somebody, whether I want to or not. I'm going to go with, do I want to go? Yeah, I might have to. Well, I've got 2 picks, so really I can go in any direction I damn well please. I'll go with Zach Taylor from Cincinnati at 12. Got to a Super Bowl, right? Defeated Kansas City along the way as well. Has done that multiple times. It's not just because of Burrow they're able to go toe-to-toe with Mahomes. Like, you got to have other counters besides just an awesome quarterback to them as well. I do think it was impressive what they were able to do with Browning as well last year in that little stretch that they had him. I mean, for the most part, they didn't have.
That was Burrow. Your boy for a couple weeks.
He was, yeah. As was DeVito and all those other guys. Yeah, just every backup quarterback that does well. I latched
Dobbs maybe for a week too.
Really, I think what it was is I was so envious that teams could have 2 good quarterbacks and my teams had like 3 or 4 and all of them sucked.
Yeah.
That I was so angry about or so invested in those other guys because of. So I'm going to go with Taylor here at 12. I like his resume right now. I think it's another one of those things where he sets his team up for success. And yeah, I don't necessarily feel ultra confident, but I don't necessarily think we're going to be feeling ultra confident about most of our picks from here on out. And then at 13, again, I don't really think I can let Harbaugh stay on the board into the second half of this.
Harbaugh. Yeah, good pick. I should have probably picked him earlier, but good.
Well, no, I actually think I would have gone with Peterson or McCarthy ahead of him. Definitely McCarthy. Peterson, I don't know. I still feel okay about picking Taylor ahead of him. I kind of want to see what happens with LA this year. I've heard some things through training camp that I really like. Ladd McConkey could end up being the number 1 sort of choice for Herbert in the offense. And I mean, if it's a white guy duo, I'm so into that. that worked in the other part of LA a couple of years back. Why not
Yeah.
with the Chargers too, with Harbaugh leading it too? Like it just makes sense. Joe Alt is going to be awesome on the O line too, but there's other pieces of the puzzle they need. They're playing in a tough conference. Like a lot of people are going to pick them as a bounce back team that can maybe make a threat to the playoffs this year, but I have them picking in the top 10 again next year. And I think it's going to be partially by design. I still, though, can't let him slide past the board because I do think not necessarily in like a 1 year confined stretch, but he's a guy who's a program builder, right? Like I don't have confidence in the Chargers this year, but 5-6 years from now, they're going to be a fucking threat. And it's going to be largely because of what that guy does. Herbert is going to get better. He's going to develop more. It's going to be because of Harbaugh. And I'll probably feel better about him as a quarterback in a handful of years than I do right now. But to me, he still just hasn't proven it to me yet. Whereas everywhere Harbaugh has gone, he's been a winner. Stanford, the Niners, when they were there, Michigan now too. Like you just know what's going to happen before it does. And it might not be this year. It might be a few years down the road. But come year 3, year 4 of this thing, you know, they could be one of the top dogs in this side of the conference if it pans out. And teams are already going to be afraid of them this year just because of who's running the show.
Agreed. Pretty much on everything there. I probably, if I forgot Harbaugh, to be honest with you, even after we talked about him, I might have had him a little bit high. I might have had him a spot or two ahead. So good call there. He has one everywhere.
Okay, man.
Don't you have one more pick?
No, I took Harbaugh and Taylor, 12-13.
Right.
So
Harbaugh, Taylor. Okay.
We're about halfway through this now. Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan were the top 3. John Harbaugh, Kevin Stefanski, Matt LaFleur, D'Amico Ryans went 4 through 7. 8, 9, 10, Tomlin, Dan Campbell, Doug Peterson, pardon me. And then 11, 12, 13, Mike McCarthy, Zach Taylor, Jim Harbaugh. Paul, you are on the clock for picks 14 and 15 in the 2024 NFL head coach draft.
At 14, this guy has, I think, fallen from a little bit of grace in the past couple of years, but he does have a decent history. That guy, Sean Payton. I don't love Sean Payton here at 14. I don't really love him that much with really what he's done in Denver. I don't think that all of the blame should fall on Russell Wilson, even though Russell Wilson didn't play as well as he has in years past in Seattle. But, you know, Russell Wilson's still a solid quarterback, and Sean Payton couldn't win anything with him there. So, and there seemed to be some sort of dissension and things just didn't work out. I think that the head coach has some culpability in that. But again, Peyton's won a Super Bowl. Now, if you want to sit here and argue with me that is Drew Brees' Super Bowl more than it is Sean Payton's, fine, I'll have that argument. But there are plenty of coaches that have had really good quarterbacks that haven't won Super Bowls. I mean, Peyton deserves some credit for that. A lot of that is more just his past success than it is currently now, but I'll put him at 14. And then at 15, I got my boy Kevin O'Connell. I think Kevin O'Connell did as much as he possibly could have last year with really nothing at all. Had Minnesota at least somewhat competitive until the final couple weeks of the year with the combinations of Dobbs, Nick Mullins, after Kirk Cousins went down. You factor in Justin Jefferson being hurt for the large majority of the year there. And O'Connell's going to have another opportunity to prove just how good he is as a head coach now with a young quarterback, albeit JJ McCarthy, somebody that I personally don't believe in. I've made that opinion pretty clear on this podcast, but we'll see. I mean, O'Connell's a great offensive mind, and maybe he can turn him into at least somebody who's capable of winning some playoff games. So it's going to be a tough division there in the NFC North for the next couple of years with how good Green Bay and Detroit are. And I think we'll get a sense of exactly how good O'Connell is as a head coach in the years coming forward. So I think, middle of the pack right now is pretty solid for him because there's a lot of like proving still to do. And I think he'll have an opportunity to do that in the coming years.
I have not seen the Receiver Show on Netflix yet.
Neither have I, but I am interested to check it out.
Well, there's a clip that I've seen on the internet somewhere from that show where after the Vikings lost in week 2, when they started this past year 0-2, there's a clip where they got the audio of him in the locker room yelling at the team after the fact. And it is awesome. Like so cool. So cool. And that really won me over for him. Like I liked him last year already with things I saw from Minnesota, dealing with injuries at the quarterback position again, rolling in multiple guys through there. Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, right? I
Yep.
think there was one other guy
There
that they
might have
had
been
in
one
there
other
at
guy.
one
Those are
point
the only
too.
two. Those are the only two I remember. But
And then Jefferson had the injury too, and he was out for large portions of the year. Like they went through a lot of shit last year, and they were still in the mix for a playoff spot until the very end. And it wasn't really by accident. They didn't have Kirk for like half a year, and Kirk was on an MVP caliber pace for the first half of the season before he got hurt.
And remember too, one of the wins that they were able to pull off with Josh Dobbs was literally like basically right off the plane for Dobbs. Like
yeah,
O'Connell was teaching Dobbs the playbook as like the game was going on. And I know that's incredibly impressive that Dobbs was able to absorb that information, the astroscientist that he is, but like
the Pastronaut.
Yeah, the Pastronaut. But like let's give the head coach a little bit of credit in that situation too.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I think that's a great pick at 15. Peyton, I get picking at 14. Like it's another one of those things where he has a ring. Like you can't let him slide too far. But I will say Drew Brees is one of the most accurate passers of the football in history. In history. If there's any quarterback who potentially did more favors for their coach, let me know.
It might be Brees for Peyton. Yeah, I agree.
Also got so lucky with the onside kick thing. Like so lucky.
The call was ballsy there though. I thought that was a good call though. Like I don't think anybody was expecting it coming out. Like that was a good coaching move.
Like he gets the rep he has just for that. I feel like that elevates him for so many people.
It does. I mean, yeah, it works out. You know, history favors the side of the winner, right?
Yeah. It's like Jonathan Papelbon on the Red Sox TV broadcast the other night was talking about how they need to invent a new stat, balls above replacement bar. And I think that Peyton definitely is like the number one overall in balls over replacement, except for maybe Dan Campbell. Like Campbell is probably number one right now, but Peyton has the previous history of success in big games.
So. Campbell's top of the list, I'd say.
I'm picking next at 16 and 17. And this whole time I've been thinking about who I would pick here. I'm going to go with Nick Sirianni at 16. And let me defend my pick before I move on to 17. Nick Sirianni, yes, is going to get a pretty bad rap at the moment.
I had him here too, by the way.
Really? So, okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
I actually think there's merit to picking him earlier than this too, though. Like
same. Like I got him in this range is what I'm saying, not like right at 16, but yeah.
Okay, I gotcha. And my defense of it essentially is like, say what you want about the tush push, but the amount that contributes to their scoring offense and has contributed and basically was a huge factor in them making it to Super Bowl, that can't be understated. And he was kind of the guy to help introduce that and go out and seek out the rugby coaches and make that a part of their offense. And say what you want about it being lame or being like a gimmick or whatever, it fucking works. And it's worked for them for multiple seasons now. And it was part of the reason for them being so successful a couple years ago. I think last year, defense broke down. Say what you want about it. He got Matt Patricia. It's okay. Happened to Belichick too. Like, you don't need to waver on it, okay? It sucks. It is what it is. I think they're going to be better this year. They still have a lot of talent in that room. They have some phenomenal guys they've drafted the last few years that could still take off. Like, people are forgetting about the Eagles, and I don't really understand why. They just added Saquon, too. They're going to be fucking disgusting next year. They're going to be so good. And, like, this time next year, people could be talking about Sirianni as a top 10 coach in the league. And they're not right now just because of how things ended last season. And yes, we saw slow-mo tapes of him like in a cold sweat, scratching his head with a panicked look on his face. Like he just saw that Long Legs movie that Nick Cage is in.
I've heard about it. I have not watched it yet, though.
It's terrifying. Very unsettling if you do give it a shot. They also, anyways, what I'm saying is, like, I have faith in Nick Sirianni. I think he's a good coach. I don't think he's one of the worst. I don't think he's in the back half of coaches in the league. I think he's in the top half. So I'm picking him at 16. I'm not letting him go any further than that. And then next up, I have Mike McDaniel. And I think these two guys you could almost say are interchangeable. Mike McDaniel another revolutionary offensive mind. They have a terrible O-line in Miami. And Tua, I think, let's be real, like he's a fair weather quarterback. But they built that offense perfectly for the players they have there. Perfectly. Around motion, movement, keeping defenses on their toes, keeping their eyes at all different parts of the field, and then capitalizing on the talented players that you have and like the unlimited speed arsenal that's at your disposal. And McDaniels has been the architect of that, man. And he's a weird dude and has some personality quirks for sure. And again, kind of fell short last year, but they were playing in like Arctic level frozen tundra temperatures in Kansas City in a game I still don't understand why the NFL allowed to happen. When is the NFL just going to mandate everybody plays in a dome? Or like, I'm a fan.
Well, I don't want everybody to play in a dome. I like the outside.
I'm not a fan of. Yeah, I like. Let me rephrase. I like snow games occasionally. I don't necessarily think it's a good idea for us to have it one game every 10 years where fans are leaving the stadium with frostbite and having to get like fingers and toes amputated and stuff, which did happen after that game. But yeah, I'm sticking with McDaniel at 17. I feel pretty good about it too. I feel better about it than I thought I would actually a few picks ago. So Sirianni 16, Mike McDaniel from the Dolphins 17.
So I'm only going to very quickly comment on McDaniel because I pretty much agree with everything you said about Sirianni.
I do think there's a couple of guys you could pick ahead of him. Like I think the next 4 or 5 coaches are all sort of interchangeable, sort of.
Yeah. I do think that you can make the argument that Sirianni could even be a couple of spots higher. So agree with pretty much everything you said there. McDaniel, you make a great point about his offensive mind. I mean, he's a great schemer. He comes from the Shanahan tree. So like, yes, extremely good. I think he's a phenomenal offensive coordinator. My problem with McDaniel is I don't think he's a leader of men. I don't think that that's a guy that you can rally behind in the clubhouse. All I have to like, I'm not in the clubhouse with him. And so maybe you could say it's unfair for me to have that opinion, but it is what it is. Like I saw the Hard Knocks. It's that they had like, when the going gets tough, I don't know if that's the guy that you want leading you or that's the guy you want in your corner.
Yeah.
Which actually, if I do compare him to a Mike Tomlin, like I think that that's the part that Mike Tomlin does great. I think it's actually the scheming on the field that Tomlin lacks a little bit. Like I think that the reason that I don't like those two coaches, it's opposite ends of the spectrum. Tomlin can always get his guys up for a game. I just don't always know if he has the adjustments in game to do it. And then for McDaniel, I think that he knows what's going on the field, but like emotionally, when it gets tough, I don't know if he knows what to say to these guys. And the Dolphins in the past 2 seasons have started off really hot and then kind of collapsed in the second half. Maybe not collapsed per se, but they really tailed off. And so I think that he should be like on at least the lukewarm seat coming into this year, because you're right. Like there is a lot of talent there. You've got Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. I've got my concerns about Tua, but like he's at least a league average quarterback at the very least. And you had a good running game with Raheem Mostert last year too. So interesting eyes there on Miami, and with Buffalo kind of unloading some of their talent and salary, like Patriots being in a down year, Jets, we don't know what things are going to be like.
They could be the favorites in that division this year.
The Dolphins, yeah, it's there. It's at least there for the taking. They can go grasp it. So we'll see if they do.
It's one of those things where like they have some tough parts of their schedule. But if they can finagle their way into a position where they're like a top 2 seed, they're going to be a threat. If you give them home playoff games,
yeah, you got to get that game at home. I mean, you got to get things at home. I mean, you don't want that team going on the road with
especially theoretically playing like cold weather teams.
Yeah,
too, having to go down and play in Miami in like December when it's like 70 degrees and kind of humid. Like,
yeah.
People are going to be like, what the fuck is this?
And that's why people, that's also a thing where big reason why people think Miami starts off hot every year is because it's just like
so
in September, you got to go there. It's mid 90s sometimes. And it's like, I'm all like NFL's a cold weather sport. And like you're right. You get these teams from up in Buffalo and whatnot. They got to go there early in the year. They are just gassed. But all right, but not too much talk about the Dolphins. We'll pivot to my next 2 picks. What numbers are we, Patrick? Just so you can remind me.
18 and 19. The last
19.
4 picks have been Sean Payton, Kevin O'Connell from the Minnesota Vikings, Nick Sirianni, and then Mike McDaniel.
All right. Okay. So here at 18-19, this is an interesting one. I'm gonna do Brian Dable, Todd Bowles.
Whoa! Really?
Yeah. What?
Still no McDermott?
Oh, I forgot about McDermott, to be honest with you. I did forget about McDermott. I am not a McDermott fan, so I'm going to say, yeah, screw him. I'm going to stick with Bowles and Dable. Look,
Damn.
Brian Dable was coach of the year just 2 years ago. He won a playoff game with Daniel Jones on the road in Minnesota. I think things collapsed this past year, but tons of injuries there that he had to deal with. I mean, like we talked about, he's had Tommy DeVito starting. I think Dable's at least a good offensive mind. I've got questions about him. I think that like he doesn't deserve all the credit in the world just because he did have one solid season, but we'll see how things pan out this year with Daniel Jones back healthy. He's got a little bit of help receiving room with Malik Neighbors now as a top 10 pick for them. Todd Bowles, I think that another guy who's been up and down. Things didn't go well when he was in New York with the Jets, although not a lot of people do have success in New York with the Jets, but turns things around here in Tampa Bay. Has been in the playoffs the past couple of years. One of those years being with Brady, but then this past year he has, sorry, I don't know why Baker Mayfield's name is escaping me, but he has Baker Mayfield, and people are like, I don't even know if Baker's going to win the job. Like, we have Baker on this new contract now. We're talking about how good he was last year, but the narrative going into this past year was like, is he even going to beat out Kyle Trask for this job? And people thought Baker was cooked and washed, and they not only get to a playoff game, they win one, and then they take Detroit down kind of to the wire on the road in the divisional round. So I think Bowles deserves some credit for that.
Yeah, not a bad pick. Bowles, I could see there being an argument for in this like 18-19 range. Dable, I do not. I do not have Dable as one of my worst coaches in the league either. I don't think that the Giants struggling last year was on him. I think it was more like injuries and personnel stuff, especially on the offensive line. Wow, I'm kind of surprised by these because I feel like besides you forgetting McDermott,
I did objectively forget McDermott, but people do know I am not a McDermott guy. I think that guy has
neither am I.
With a really good roster. So I'm not like terribly miffed that I don't have him in my top 20. Like maybe I'd have him on the like right here, but I'm gonna keep him. We'll see. You can pick him next if you want.
I'm gonna take him. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
taking McDermott at 20. Look, like say what you want. He's been part of Allen becoming the guy that he is as well. And I know that they haven't had that like final big game win, but to be fair, not everybody beats Mahomes. Like it's only been a few guys that have done it in the playoffs, right? Only been a couple of people. It's very right now. That's almost like besides like winning awards and that sort of thing. That's like one of the best fraternities you can get in the professional football circle currently. At least like if you're playing and coaching the game right now. I do have some gripes with McDermott. Like there's some management stuff there that I really don't like. And there's even some things about Allen at times that I don't like, but we're not talking about Allen specifically here. We're talking about McDermott, and I do think he should be higher than 20 on this list. I think he should be like probably in the top half, but closer to the middle tier. Him landing at 20 to me is a little surprising, but hey, here we are. Sometimes that happens in a draft. I could have easily picked him over McDaniel or Sirianni if I wanted to in my last couple of picks, but I didn't. And there's reasons for that. So we're going with McDermott at 20. 21, I'm going to go with Shane Steichen from Indianapolis, I should say. I feel like he's the best available right now. There's some other guys you can make cases for, and I think you could even slide him up a few spots on this list. I think he's one of the guys that has the most potential to grow when you and I do our version of this next year, perhaps, right? Like having Indianapolis as a fringe playoff team until the last couple of weeks of the season, working with no Anthony Richardson for the most part, Gardner Minshew, no Jonathan Taylor for the most part. Instead, like he dealt with his fair share of injuries there too, and had to deal with their roster is pretty good there, and they have some talent on both sides of the ball. But at the same time, like I don't think anybody really pegged them to finish with the record they did last year. And I think they're going to be tough again this year. And I'm really excited to see who Anthony Richardson could be. Steichen's a great choice at 21, I think. And really like could be higher on this list too. Like I would have taken him over Dayball. I might have taken him over Bulls. Probably would have. I actually think with the Bucks specifically last year, their success is going to be more attributed to Canales in hindsight. Canales taking over with the Panthers now this year. I think he's going to do a great job with them, but he was a phenomenal OC in Tampa last year as well. So my choices at 20 and 21, Sean McDermott of Buffalo and Shane Steichen of the Indianapolis Colts.
So Shane Steichen, I certainly think you make a really good argument for. I definitely could have seen him being higher. Splitting hairs a little bit. Excuse me. If we do this exact same exercise like a year from today, I mean, I could definitely see Steichen shooting up past some of the names I've said, like Bulls, Dable. Those guys just at least have a playoff win under their belt, and Steichen doesn't. But like in the same sense, Steichen lost his young quarterback early in the season last year. He had to make do with Gardner Minshew, albeit a good, competent backup quarterback, but a backup quarterback. So it'll be interesting. This Indianapolis, I think, arguably, like that AFC South division preview that we're going to do is the one that I'm looking forward to the most because there are multiple wild cards in there, and like we have no idea what Indianapolis could look like if Anthony Richardson comes back, stays healthy, and looks like he did in the first couple of weeks. So Steichen's a good pick there. He did still do a good job even after he went down. Just touching on McDermott real quick because I do want to move on to my picks. I don't know. I just think that this guy, like, they're still like in. I remember that game against Denver that they had where they couldn't get the kick team on the field in time, and I think that they ended up losing that game. It was on Monday Night Football. Like at some point, like you talked about it in a similar sense. Peterson's going to feel pressure in Jacksonville because they're not going to blame Trevor Lawrence, right? You know, because he got the bag. Well, Josh Allen's been paid too. Like they're not going to blame Josh Allen. You know, Josh Allen throws a lot of turnovers. I get it, but he still makes spectacular plays. Like at the end of the day, the pressure is going to fall on the head coach. And when the same thing happens over and over again, and you're expecting different results, it's called insanity. They keep getting to the same spot in the playoffs, but nothing further. At some point, you got to break through, and the head coach has to help facilitate that. So that's my last point about McDermott. Going forward here, like we're starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel, but I'll go with a guy that I know you're not a fan of. Like Dan Quinn has at least made it to a Super Bowl. So I'm gonna take Dan Quinn next. I think that we're allowing that because we had Jim Harbaugh in there as well. So I'm gonna put Dan Quinn here. We'll see how things go with him in Washington. He's got a young quarterback in Jaden Daniels to work with. I don't know how that's going to go. I still think that there's a little bit of a rebuild that Washington has to go through, and that was a pretty bad team last year, so it's not going to just happen all right away. But this is guys had success in the past. I guess I'll go Robert Saleh next. I think that at points last year, I was kind of impressed with what he was doing because I thought the Jets kind of stayed together for at least a time after Aaron Rodgers went down, but there still hasn't been a lot of success really since he's gotten there. I don't know how well of a feel he has for the offensive side of the ball, but let's keep in mind with Zach Wilson, he just wasn't the guy. Like at least now, I think that Aaron Rodgers, even a 40-year-old injured Aaron Rodgers, is going to be better than the output that Zach Wilson had on the field last year. So maybe things will be better. We will 100%, like this will be a huge year for Saleh and us judging him. I'll put him here kind of by default. I don't feel super comfortable about it, but I got Dan Quinn and Robert Saleh, and that combination is the worst I felt about a duo since we started doing this. So I think that we're getting to that point in the exercise.
Oh yeah. Yeah. This is like more like rapid fire exercise now, but I do love having the opportunity to take Antonio Pierce here next. I was very high on him when he took over in Oakland last year, was ecstatic when it was announced he'd be taking over full-time going forward after the season ended. I think he's a great fit in Oakland. He's dealing with some off the field stuff right now with his family filing for bankruptcy, which kind of sucks. So I don't know if he's actually like going to be making any money to coach there, but what gives you more incentive to try to win on the field than coaching for free? Yeah, I love Pierce here at 24 and would probably take him over Saleh. In fact, I definitely would. I'm going to go with Matt Eberflus next. And I feel like it's almost a little unfair that he's getting picked this low. And I know like he hasn't exactly had a great track record in Chicago. They did make the playoffs a few years ago. Remember that. They lost on the double doink, but they made it. with him, I think you just have to look at Justin Fields specifically and how difficult he made it to have a normally functioning offense last year, and how they were still able at times to like win games and end up within scratching distance of 500. So I'm interested to see how it looks with Chicago this year. Certainly, like if they don't have a winning record, or if things don't look how they expect with Caleb Williams in there and the revamped offensive pieces, like there will be a change made sooner rather than later, I would assume. But I feel okay with him ending up at a 25 here. Like, I don't know. Sort of to your point, this is the bottom of the barrel. Which order would you prefer picking Dennis Allen, Jonathan Gannon, and Raheem Morrison, my friend?
I will put Gannon at the top of the remaining guys. I thought, look, I'm not saying Jonathan Gannon is anything that inspiring, but I thought he at the very least, and this is a low bar, he had a Cardinals team that was well out of it, playing tough at the end of the year. They pulled off an upset.
You really are scarred by that game against your Steelers, aren't you?
Well, like they played tough. I thought this team was a much tougher team once Kyler Murray got back, and they were not an easy out. Yes, they beat my Steelers late in the season, to my dismay. So I think he deserves a little bit of credit for keeping the guys together in a locker room and keeping them motivated in a year that would have been easy to throw the towel in. They had a ton of draft picks this past year. They get Marvin Harrison. So I think that there's some optimism that things could be a little bit better, albeit it is a very tough division, obviously, with the Rams and Niners there, and even the Seahawks are decent. But I'll put Gannon at the top of the rest. And then you said Dennis Allen and Raheem Morris. I guess I'll take Dennis Allen, but I really don't want to take either one of the other guys. So it's what it is.
Man, yeah, the beginning of these exercises are always pretty obvious. And then I feel like the middle is where you actually get some good discourse and discussion.
And then by the end, I'm just like, dude, can we stop? I don't want to say these names.
It's like, oh man, do I really have to pick between these two? But hey, here we are. Okay, that was the 2024 NFL head coaches draft presented to you by Pat and Kamish. We got a few more things that we got to wrap up with here as well. Paul, my friend, first of all, great exercise. To recap, Andy Reid 1, Sean McVay 2, Shanahan 3, Harbaugh, John 4, Kevin Stefanski, Matt LaFleur, D'Amico Ryans, and Tomlin go 5 through 8. Dan Campbell at 9, Doug Peterson 10, Mike McCarthy 11, Zach Taylor 12, Jim Harbaugh 13, Sean Payton, Kevin O'Connell, and Nick Sirianni 14 through 16, Mike McDaniel, Brian Daboll, Todd Bowles 17 through 19, Sean McDermott, Shane Steichen, Dan Quinn, Robert Saleh, Antonio Pierce, Matt Eberflus, Jonathan Gannon, and then we finished with Dennis Allen and Raheem Morris. Raheem Morris getting included in the draft pool just to get picked last. Congratulations. Moving on. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to Reddit, I saw this really awesome nugget about the NFL. There are only 6 teams in the history of the league without MVPs since the AFL-NFL merger in 1970. There are some teams who have some history previous to that. Joe Namath was named the AFL MVP in 68. That was back when the AFL and NFL had separate MVPs. They would still come together at the end of the year to play the Super Bowl between leagues, but that was right when the Super Bowl first started. Joe Namath had the famous Super Bowl win with the Jets in 1969 that he essentially like called the result.
The guarantee.
Game. Yep. He also received MVP votes in 67 and 69. He finished 4th in the NFL MVP voting in 72. The Jets haven't had anybody even receive NFL MVP votes since then. I think Chad Pennington got some Offensive Player of the Year votes when he was there at one point, I think.
I don't ever remember Chad Pennington being good enough to be in the Offensive Player of the Year discussion, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think he was in the top 10 for Offensive Player of the Year like once in his career. I might be wrong on that.
Good for him then.
But since then, they've had nobody. And now, of course, they've got Aaron Rodgers there, who has won MVPs in the past, potentially could deliver an MVP to the Jets if they have a really good year this year. This is kind of the point of our exercise. The Cardinals of Arizona, who I didn't realize have been a football organization since like 1920. They've been around for over 100 years.
They were in Chicago for a while.
Yeah, they were in Chicago for a long time. They were in St. Louis as well. Pat Harter actually won an MVP for them in 1948 with the St. Louis Cardinals. No, the Chicago Cardinals. He was a part of their $1 million backfield, which included quarterback Paul Christman, halfbacks Marshall Goldberg, and Charlie Trippy. And he was the first player in league history to score over 100 points in 3 consecutive years as a fullback kicker combo, which he did from 1947 to 1949. He led the league in points all 3 years. That's pretty crazy. He was then traded to the Detroit Lions in 1951, where they won back-to-back NFL championships in 1952 and 1953.
What kind of world was that in the 50s?
Pretty crazy.
The Cardinals were $1 million backfield was considered a huge thing, and then the Detroit Lions were winning NFL championships. Wow. How the times have changed.
They also had Terry Metcalf finish as the 1974 MVP runner-up. He finished 3rd in 1975, it looks like. Yeah, 1975. Terry Metcalf very famously only played like 6 seasons in the NFL, but had a really incredible peak in those years between 73 and 75. 75 especially being like a receiving, rushing, return threat, sort of like jack of all trades. Played a little bit in the Canadian Football League as well between 78, 79, and 80, and then played with the Redskins in 81 before eventually retiring. They also had Larry Wilson, runner-up for the MVP of the 1966 season. So really like throwbacks for the Cardinals. But then we've also had some teams who have short histories. Like they just haven't really had many swings at it. The Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence finished 7th in MVP voting in 2020-22. The only time that they've had any player of theirs receive MVP votes. No love for Maurice Jones-Drew, Byron Leftwich, Blake Bortles, any of those guys. The Texans have only been around since the early 2000s, I believe. J.J. Watt was the runner-up for the MVP in 2014, pretty famously. He was the Defensive Player of the Year 3 times in a 4-year stretch between 2012, 2014, and 2015. And then CJ Stroud finished 7th in MVP voting last year. We also have, well, I guess those are like the main teams. The Bucs we have in there as well. Tom Brady finished as runner-up in 2021. Derek Brooks, 4th in MVP voting in 2002, the year they won the Super Bowl. He won the Defensive Player of the Year that year. Leroy Selman, 1979 Defensive Player of the Year for the Bucs. And we got to mention the Saints as well. Drew Brees, 3-time MVP runner-up. Offensive Player of the Year in 2008. Would have been the runner-up in the MVP that year, but Tom Brady was the unanimous MVP selection. George Rogers, Offensive Rookie of the Year in 81. Alvin Kamara, 2017. And Michael Thomas, the 2019 Offensive Player of the Year. Paul, coming from a team that has had an MVP season in the past, these teams, I'm sure, still have guys that hang their hat, or they have guys that they hang their hat on, guys that are their favorites, best players of all time. Besides the obvious Drew Brees, is there an obvious choice for, wow, I'm surprised this team hasn't had an MVP winner? I mean, the Cardinals had Kurt Warner and Carson Palmer have pretty good years. Kyler Murray as well. I don't know.
You're on the right team. You just picked the wrong guy. If you go back and you look at the season of 2008, so that was the year that the Arizona Cardinals went to the Super Bowl and lost to my Pittsburgh Steelers in Super Bowl 43. Larry Fitzgerald absolutely has a case to be MVP. And if MVP took into account playoff numbers, Fitzgerald would have ran away with it. So this was back in 2008. The guy who won the MVP that year was Peyton Manning, who had just over 4,000 yards with 27 touchdowns and 12 picks. It doesn't sound that crazy of a stat line. Fitzgerald's regular season numbers, and him not winning the MVP is just a product of it's a quarterback award. It's tough for the receiver to win. But 96 catches for 1,431 yards and 12 touchdowns. Those were his regular season stats. You want to hear what he did in 4 playoff games that season? Please. Absolutely nuts. Please 4 games, 30 catches, 546 yards and 7 touchdowns in 4 postseason games. And he put the Cardinals ahead with just over 2 minutes to go against my Steelers as he outran Troy Polamalu all the way to the end zone. That, of course, before Ben Roethlisberger engineers the drive and the throw and catch to Santonio Holmes. But Larry Fitzgerald, and don't take away anything from Kurt Warner, because Kurt Warner's a Hall of Famer and had a great year that year himself. But Larry Fitzgerald, absolutely, if you go back and look at the numbers and then you factor in his playoffs, to me, I think that you could redo the 2008 season and say Fitzgerald was the MVP of that year. So that's the other biggest snub of this list, in my opinion.
I do think, like, I'm a Brady homer, but you could make an argument for him winning over Rodgers in 2021. He had 43 touchdowns, over 5,000 yards passing. Yep. He had 12,000 more passing yards than Rodgers. 12,000. He also had like almost 200 more passing.
You mean 1,200?
1,200. Yeah, not 12,000. Yeah. Jeez, 12,000. 12,000 passing yards in a season. They passed every play. They may as well have. Now, Lenny Fournette was getting handoffs sometimes too. Yeah, Tom Brady in 2021, just being
that is an easy one. Yeah, that's a good call.
The Brady stan that I am. JJ Watt in 2014, like, he had a few touchdowns that year, not just on defense, on offense too. Like, he contributed as a tight end. He was a two-way player at that point in his career. Breeze is, I think, the one that history will look back on and be like, how did he not win an MVP? Because, again, he had the Offensive Player of the Year in 2008 to that MVP season we both just mentioned. And then he had 3 other runner-up finishes for the award. And this was all after the whole shoulder injury situation in Los Angeles, where people weren't even sure if he was ever going to be able to throw normally again. It kind of reminds me of what people have talked about with Burrow a little bit, like just the concern about the level to play that he's going to have throwing the ball, right? So that to me, I think, is the most glaring, those two there. But I love your Larry Fitzgerald little hat tip too. That's a great choice.
Yeah. The one thing I will add about Drew Brees, because Drew Brees is the biggest, like, of these teams, like Drew Brees should have won an MVP some point in his career. 2 seasons that you didn't even mention, 2011 and 2012 were honestly the seasons that stood out to me when I went
mentioned
back.
2011 because he was the runner-up that year. Yeah,
my apologies. Those seasons stood out to me of Pro Football Reference when I look back at his numbers. Both of those seasons, 11 and 12, he threw for over 5,000 yards, and he threw for 46 and 43 touchdowns respectively.
70% or higher completion percentage.
Yeah, obviously, like, the most accurate passer in NFL history. Now, I will say this. If you look back in 2011 and 2012, the guys who won the MVP, certainly extremely deserving. 2011, I know you're not a big fan, but Aaron Rodgers had 4,600 yards, 46 touchdowns to just 5 picks.
That was their Super Bowl year, right?
I think you're one off, but it's in that Rodgers has won it multiple times. So, but regardless, phenomenal year. And then in 2012, Adrian Peterson wins it with over 2,000 rushing yards. So it's like, it's deserving candidates. Sometimes it's about when you have your breakout season, not necessarily that you have it, but Breeze is good. I did want to talk about one guy I thought on the Jets, actually. I didn't get a chance to bring him up when you were talking about some of the Jets guys, because if you go back, you talked about Brady on the Bucks, the Jags, I will just throw out Fred Taylor had a couple really good seasons in the early 2000s. That was like the first guy I thought of, but a little bit before my time. Maurice Jones-Drew, maybe an honorable mention there as well. But the guy I want to talk about on the Jets is Curtis Martin. Curtis Martin had a phenomenal,
see if this was the guy you're going to mention.
Phenomenal NFL career.
Patriots killer.
I want to talk about his 2004 season in particular. The Jets were 10-6 that year. They were a 5 seed in the playoffs. They were actually beaten by my Pittsburgh Steelers. That was Ben Roethlisberger's rookie year. So they made it to the divisional round of the playoffs. Curtis Martin, at the age of 31 in 2004, keep that in mind, led the league in rushing attempts with 371 attempts, 1,697 yards. Ridiculous, and helps lead the Jets to a playoff berth at 10 wins. Like, running backs, it's not a running back award, but man, like, that is deserving. I don't remember where he finished or if he placed, in top 5 or whatever of MVP voting that year, but I think that deserves a shout. The actual MVP,
2004 was Peyton Manning. Michael Vick finished second.
Peyton Manning, yeah.
Curtis Martin finished 4th in the Offensive Player of the Year voting.
So Peyton Manning that year, I have his stats written down. You can fact check me on this. 4,557 yards, 49 touchdowns, and 10 picks. Like, it's an unreal. Like, there's no way a running back is ever going to win an MVP over a quarterback that has that type of season. But still, I think Curtis Martin deserves a shout.
There was one other season I had to. Where is it? Oh my God. There's one year where oh fuck. I don't know if I can find it. Anyways, is it 77? Is it 77? Yeah, 1977. 1977 NFL AP MVP voting. Guess who finished 5th? There is a college award named after him.
The Heisman or no, that had to be way earlier. Sorry. It's Fred Belindikoff for the Belindikoff Award. No,
not even close.
Then I don't think I'm gonna get it.
Ray Guy, punter for the Oakland Raiders, finished
Ray Guy
in AP MVP voting that year. A punter.
That's insane.
What would a punter have to do nowadays to get MVP votes?
It would have to be like
he didn't record a single passing, rushing, or receiving yard, by the way. This was strictly off being the best damn punter the league has ever seen. Ray Guy.
You'd have to have an NFL team that would have a season trajectory just like this past year's Iowa Hawkeyes football team did. And like you would just have to like win games 9-6 and try to pin your opponent deep in their territory so that then you can force a punt and get good field position yourself. That's the only way. It's
even
the only way.
Like I think you'd still have to have a few like trick play touchdown passes or like maybe a few forced fumbles on like tackles in the open field or something. Like you got to do more than just punt in today's day and age to
not in Ray Guy's be considered.
Can you imagine that though? That was 50 years ago, but like.
I didn't know about that stat, dude. I guess like back in that day and age, you didn't throw the ball as much. Like it was more run centric. So I guess field position played like a bigger part in things. Like the field position doesn't swing as drastically on line of scrimmage plays, I guess. But even still, man.
Walter Payton won the MVP that year with over 1,800 rushing yards, 14 rushing touchdowns.
I think that he's probably more deserving than Ray Guy. Probably for that year, probably.
The highest finishing quarterback with the award was Bob Gracie, Miami Dolphins.
Okay.
22 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 2,200 yards, thereabout.
Different day and age, dude. Different day and age, man.
Man, I would love to go back and watch a few of those games on TV just to understand. I'm gonna be up all night watching Ray Guy highlight tapes, man.
It isn't Ray Guy. I mean, Ray Guy could punt the ball. Don't get me wrong. Like that, you don't get an award named after you for no reason. But
that's fair.
MVP.
Yeah, no disrespect to the GOAT. My apologies.
That's another. He is the GOAT of punting, absolutely. But
we didn't even get to the real meat and potatoes of this segment. Teams without MVPs. Paul, out of the Buccaneers, Cardinals, Jaguars, Jets, Saints, and Texans. Who do you think is best positioned to either A, win an MVP in this season? Let me read you that. Who do you think is best positioned to win an MVP either A, in this season, or B, in the near future? So it doesn't have to be this calendar year, because I think that's slightly unfair. But let's say for the next, like, just out of these teams, who do you think gets it done first? And will it be with these crop of current players?
Yeah, to me, like I think that this is low hanging fruit, but I mean, I got to go CJ Stroud winning it with the Texans. He's a quarterback. I mean, he's one of the budding stars in the league. They did get more talent around them this year, but I still it's not an offense per se where it's like, how in Philadelphia they got multiple like stud receivers or take a look at Chicago this year. Like Caleb Williams will get a lot of credit if he has success, but he's got Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and now Rome Odunze there as well. like there are good players there in Houston, but make no mistake, the engine that drives that force is CJ Stroud. We saw it last year. So he's the slam dunk out of the teams right now and the crop of players that they have. Like I think Stroud will win an MVP somewhere in the next 5 years. So I will go with him and Houston Texans.
5 years, I could see certainly 10. Like I think he will win an MVP at some point in his career. Yeah, I think that's a good bet. I do think like storybook wise, as much as I have a distaste for him, Aaron Rodgers bringing an MVP to the New York Jets would be crazy. Like just the magnitude of what that situation would look like. I mean, like Brady won an MVP at 40 plus too. But it's not like he couldn't. I wouldn't say it's expected, but plus like when he last played, he didn't look good, right? Forget last year, the year before that, his last year in Green Bay. That was arguably one of the worst iterations we've seen of Aaron Rodgers in his entire career. So, you got to think about that with that caveat. But certainly that would be the most like storybook out of all these. Trevor Lawrence, we mentioned him earlier. He's a previous 1-1. Certainly you would hope he gets an MVP someday, but I don't necessarily know that's a given. Kyler Murray with the Cardinals, weirdly, I think has the second easiest path to an MVP. Not best chances, but easiest path. Because I think, let's say the Cardinals somehow stumble into winning their division in the next couple of years, right? That'd
have to be a hell of a stumble with some of the teams they have in that division. But
yeah, it wouldn't be on accident. And you would have to think it would be on the shoulders of Kyler doing the damn thing. I don't necessarily think it's likely, but
let me paint this picture for you, because there was a guy I was thinking on Arizona, but it wasn't Kyler Murray. What if Marvin Harrison really is the best wide receiving prospect we've seen? Why not? Why not? He was the first guy I thought of in Arizona. What if he puts up like a Larry Fitzgerald-esque like 1,500, 1,600 yards, and he has like a Justin, like what if he is as good as Justin Jefferson? Do you think you could see
if Michael Thomas and Cooper Kupp can't sniff an MVP after setting records? Like
I guess winning a triple crown with Kupp, yeah.
Like what are you gonna do? Right? You would have to break multiple records in a season and lead the league in every statistical category as a receiver. I understand your sentiment. I just don't think it's feasible, really.
That's fair. I mean, it would probably take 2,000 yards and like close to 15 touchdowns to really be in that discussion.
Yeah.
At least, don't you think? Yeah.
And also he's kind of my like Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts choice this year for a guy that will struggle in his first year. Huh? I think he's just going to struggle in his first year. I think that people expect him to like be like a top 10 receiver in the league right off rip, which is a little unfair. Like, I think he will be someday. I just don't think it's going to happen right away. Right.
That's fair. I mean, it's still not like the best offense. Kyler's okay. I think Kyler will be able to get him the ball, but there are better quarterbacks out there. So I can get behind. I can understand where you're coming from on that too. It's a little bit of a stretch, but I was trying to think outside the box with it. I mean, if he is all that everybody says, like best wide receiving prospect we've seen in decades, maybe ever. I mean, because I've heard that thrown around. He's the best wide receiving prospect we've ever seen. Like, I mean, sky could be the limit for him. I'm not going to put him up there like say he does Calvin Johnson type things or anything, but like this is a guy that might have 2,000 yards in a 17 game season. So.
Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting thought. Not necessarily one I share, but it's an interesting thought for sure. It's just more so I think it's like almost impossible for a receiver to win that award nowadays. Any love for Baker or like Spencer Rattler? I don't know.
No, I just don't think those guys are talented enough. Like Baker's a solid quarterback. We know what he is, but that's what he is. He's a solid quarterback. Solid guys don't win MVP. So
it sounds like we're both hanging our hat on CJ Stroud for the future.
Yeah, I mean Trevor Lawrence wasn't a bad one that you brought up either. I don't know if like I think I'm more in Trevor Lawrence's camp than you are. but I still am not to the point where I'm like Trevor Lawrence hasn't shown me anything, even in his really good year from was it 2 years ago at this point when he threw like 26 touchdowns, 9 picks, and they went to the playoffs. Like even that wasn't MVP caliber for me. Like
he got votes. He got votes.
I know he got votes, but like with what numbers we see quarterbacks put up this day and age, like you got to be pushing, I think, at least 40 touchdowns or add a lot on the ground like we see Lamar do, you know?
Yeah, that's fair.
And I just don't think that we've seen that from Lawrence yet. Maybe he'll develop that in a year or two, but I would go Stroud.
Okay. Well, this has been fun, my friend. This has been fun.
It's some enlightening discussion. I agree.
The Fifth and Long summer tour continues. It's White Boy Summer, ladies and gentlemen, hosted by Pat and Paul here. I can't believe I just said that. But yeah, this has been a fun episode talking drafting head coaches, some MVPs as well, potential MVPs, past misses on the award, maybe coulda, shoulda, woulda. And Paul and I are going to be back sooner than you might realize. We're going to be doing all kinds of preseason content.
We're barely even going to leave, ladies and gentlemen. So don't get worried.
Exactly. 53 days away, 52 when you're listening to this on July 15th. And buddy, I can't wait. We'll be leading it up 50 days of football before it, so stay tuned, all right?
Get those mock drafts started. There is never a point in the time in summer where it's too early to start a mock draft. You win your fantasy championships by starting to put in the work now in mid-July. Laugh at me if you want.
You heard it here, managers. Unless you're as gifted as the Jack Nonamacher himself, put your work in. Paul, thank you. Fifth and Long listeners, thank you. Stay tuned, boys and girls, or non-binaries, all the above. We got another episode coming for you right around the corner. Paul, my friend, good night. Anything else?
Hey, I would just say stay strong, guys. We're about to, after the All-Star game on Tuesday, it's like the 2 most dead days of the year for sports. And you might be listening to this podcast either Wednesday or Thursday of this week. There's literally nothing going on, so just stay strong. Talk to someone if you need to. There's life outside of sports. Other than that, God bless everyone.
Awesome. Paul, my friend, thanks. Fifth and Long listeners, we'll see you next time right here on the Fifth and Long podcast.